I stumbled out of bed with a head that felt like it was going to explode. Once in the bathroom, I quickly downed 2 aspirin. My stomach felt like it was going to rebel, so I hung by the toilet for about 10 minutes. During the time, it all came back to me. My name is Ron Jameson, and when I returned from work yesterday, my loving wife, Chrissy, blindsided me. She started off telling me that she loved me, but then explained that she had been seeing another man for the past year and was in love with him also. She explained it as a simple act of caring. The man, who she refused to name, had been in a horrible car accident, and his wife had been killed while he walked away without a scratch. He felt so terribly guilty about this. Chrissy explained that she just started out trying to help him deal with his emotional pain, and they'd fallen in love. And yes, she admitted that they had had sex. Chrissy even admitted that sometimes the sex was very good. Of course, throughout this entire nightmare of a conversation, she insisted that she loved me and would eventually return to me. But as long as this man needed her, she was going to be there for him. She assured me that she would be there for our kids and me as well. The man was considerably younger than her, and she knew that eventually he'd move on. But for however long he needed her, she wanted to be there for him. This was about the worst nightmare any married man could walk into. Stunned, I did what just about any man would do. I accused my wife of being a 304 and hooker. At that point, Chrissy unloaded on me. She told me she was totally disappointed in my reaction. Chrissy actually had the audacity to say to me that if I really loved her, I would accept the situation. She told me that in our wedding vows, I promised to love, honor, and cherish her. It was clear that Chrissy was disappointed and angry with me. I was beyond furious, and to keep from hitting her, I started drinking and yelling. When I calmed down a little, I asked her how she would like it if I found another woman. Chrissy said, "Who would want me?" According to her, I was an overweight, middle-aged man with thinning hair. She also warned me that if I tried to divorce her, she'd ruin me. I was beyond livid and totally at a loss as to what I could or should do at that moment. My brain was in total meltdown. I couldn't process anything logically. Perhaps not my finest moment, but I continued to drink and rage at Chrissy. She packed a bag and announced that she was leaving and would go to her lover until I could calm down and accept the situation. I didn't remember much after that. As I sat on my bed, our bed, I decided to take stock. Chrissy was right. I was middle-aged and my hair was thinning. And I had to admit that I was also about 20 pounds overweight. I couldn't do anything about being middle-aged, but I knew I could do something about the hair and the weight. But before I would do anything, I had to find out where my kids were. It was Saturday morning, so they should be here at home. A quick search of the house showed that they weren't. So where the hell did Chrissy stash them? I was about to call her parents when I heard a car pull up in the driveway. When I looked out the window, it was Chrissy's car. I could see our kids getting out and heading toward the house. I met Chrissy at the front door. "Good. I see you're sober," she said with a snap to her voice. "Where were the kids?" I asked with a snap to my voice. "They were with me. I couldn't very well leave the kids with you. You didn't take them to your sex toys house, did you?" I hissed. "Ron, watch your language," she snapped once again. "They were already there," she said as though that was absolutely natural. "My friend is a wonderfully kind person. You, on the other hand, were disgraceful yesterday. I wouldn't dare have left them with you." "Fair point about me," I admitted. "But why didn't you take the kids to your parents' place?" "They weren't home," Chrissy said as she breezed by me and went upstairs. I followed her into our bedroom. "Are you here to stay, or are you going running back to your lover?" "Oh, please, Ron, stop being so childish. I told you how things are going to be. I have no intention of arguing with you about it. The discussion is over. Accept it or don't, that's your choice. Even though you're acting like an idiot, I still love you. And as I told you, when he no longer needs me, I'll be back full time. So, what do we do now?" I was fighting to keep my cool. "Right now, I'm going to pack a few things because I'm going to spend a few days with my friend until you finally cool down and accept the situation." "What about the kids?" I thought that might shame her into staying. It didn't. "If you don't want to watch them, call my parents. I'm sure they will." Chrissy then packed another bag of clothes and left. At this point, my head was ready to explode. However, I knew I had to keep it together for the kids. But I wasn't going to take Chrissy's affair lying down. No self-respecting man would. After Chrissy left, I checked on the kids and asked them if they had any homework. All 3 said they did. I told them to get on it right away. There was a lot of moaning and groaning until I informed them that when they were finished, we'd go over to Pop and Grammy's house. They're Chrissy's parents. The kids all cheered. They loved going there because Pop was helping all three of my kids build go-karts. They had been working on them, off and on, for several months. The carts had to be close to being finished. Chrissy's parents, Sam and Mary, lived on a small farm about 15 minutes away. They were both retired, and Sam just loved tinkering. In addition to doing a little farming, he loved to build and repair things. He had a very substantial workshop he used for all of his projects, and that's where they worked on the carts. When time permitted, I would lend a hand. I'm a certified dealer mechanic for the local Ford dealership. It's the largest dealership in the Tri-County area. I wanted to talk to Chrissy's parents to see if they knew about her boyfriend, and more importantly, if they knew who he was. I also wanted to get their advice as to what I should do. I had always had a great relationship with them. Since my parents lived 3 states away, I considered Sam and Mary as my surrogate mother and father. However, I was a little apprehensive because I was afraid they would take Chrissy's side in this whole mess. That would totally destroy our relationship. I went room to room, checking that the kids were doing their homework, and they were. It was then that it struck me just how much my kids were my pride and joy. Ron was the oldest, and he was 16. Only the close family called him Ron. We started that to avoid confusion as to whether Chrissy was talking to her son or me. He was quite a football player, but really wasn't big enough to get a scholarship to college. Sally was a year younger and a typical teenager. She loved to push the boundaries but was a great student. Kyle, the baby, was only 11. He hated being called the baby, but Chrissy would still do it. Kyle was a happy accident. We weren't planning on having any more kids when Chrissy discovered she was pregnant. But Kyle had been such a happy-go-lucky child that he was a joy to have around. While the kids worked upstairs, I made myself a cup of coffee and started to make a list. I had a lot to do, and I didn't know how much time I'd have to do it. The first thing I did was to call my boss, Bob Clarkson, and fill him in on my problem. I had worked for the dealership since it was founded 23 years ago, and Bob had been my boss for at least 15 years. If I do say so myself, I was one of the better mechanics at the dealership. Bob listened to my tale of woe and was very sympathetic as his son had gone through a messy divorce a year before. It had gotten really nasty. Nasty to the point where his son's ex-wife, Carol, accused him of molesting their daughter. "Damn," I said. "That is one cold witch. Tell me about it," Bob said with evident bitterness. It was touch and go for about a week. We expected the police to arrest Gary at any minute. These are the kind of accusations that are devastating and almost impossible to disprove. And the police run scared every time a woman starts pointing the finger at a man. The only thing that saved Gary was his ex-mother-in-law. When Carol told her mother that Gary had molested her granddaughter, I think she thought that would be the final nail in Gary's coffin. Everyone knows Bev is ruthless. What I didn't know was that she has an equal share of fairness. She immediately took her granddaughter out of preschool and took her to her general practitioner. Bev had the doctor examine her granddaughter to determine if she had been molested. The doctor stated unequivocally that there was no way her granddaughter had been molested. Armed with that information, Bev marched over to the police department and told them if they pursued charges against Gary, she would testify against her daughter. Then Bev told Carol that if she pursued this course of action, she would tell the court about her drug problems, and she'd lose her daughter. "God bless, Bev," I said, somewhat shocked to learn what women are capable of doing to get their way. "Amen to that," Bob replied. "So, if there is anything I can do to help you, let me know, Ron. If it's within my power to make it happen, I will." Since I had 12 personal days and 6 weeks of vacation time accrued, I asked for the following week off. Bob readily agreed, and in fact, he told me if I needed to take all of my personal days and my vacation together, he'd work it out for me. As it turned out, that is precisely what I did. "There is something else you can help me with," I explained. "I need the name of a good divorce lawyer if you know one." "That's easy," he said. "Use the attorney my son used." He cleaned Carol's clock. Gary got primary custody of their daughter, gets to live in the house, and Carol has to pay child support. His name is Dwight Tucker. I think I still have his number here somewhere. The messier my son's divorce got, the more we communicated through lawyers, and it got to where I started hearing Mr. Tucker's name in my sleep. Bob took about a minute and finally found Dwight Tucker's card. With the number, I called the attorney's office. I didn't expect anyone to be there on a Saturday, but figured I'd leave a message. But luck was with me because not only was Mr. Tucker there, but his secretary told me he had had a cancellation. He'd see me if I could make it to the office in 30 minutes. I told the kids that I had to go out for an hour or so and to behave. I then jumped in my car and made it to Mr. Tucker's office in 20 minutes. Dwight Tucker appeared to be in his early or mid-30s. He was a good-looking man a couple of inches shorter than me. He had deep blue eyes and a very welcoming smile. I had no doubt that Dwight scored big points with the lady jurors. "What can I do for you today?" Dwight asked after I had settled myself into a chair. "My wife told me yesterday that she is cheating on me with a younger man," I said as I could feel my face flush with embarrassment and anger. I laid out as concisely as I could what had transpired the previous day. Dwight sat, taking notes as he shook his head. When I told him that my wife claimed to still love me, but she was going to keep sleeping with the guy, he stopped me. "Let me get this straight." Dwight's eyes had darkened a little. "Your wife says she loves you, but is going to keep screwing this poor lost soul?" My face flushed big time with embarrassment. I just nodded. "Okay, go ahead," Dwight prompted. I went on to say that Chrissy had gotten angry with me when I refused to go along with her plan. I also admitted that I'd called her a 304 and a hooker. Painfully, I explained that Chrissy had laughed when I asked her how she would feel if I went out and got a woman. It was extremely painful and embarrassing to admit how Chrissy belittled me as a man and told me I'd never be able to find a woman that would want me. Not only that, but she promised she would ruin me if I tried to divorce her. "She actually said all that to you?" Dwight asked in a voice that was filled with incredulity. "No offense, Mr. Fremont, but your wife is either one of the most callous persons ever or she has some serious mental issues." "None taken," I sighed. "I think so myself." Then I explained how she had left the kids at her lover's house yesterday when we had our argument, and they spent the night there. Dwight's head snapped up for a second, and he smiled. Then he put his head down and wrote something. "Okay, now for the $64,000 question. What do you want to do?" Dwight asked as he looked up and steepled his fingers. I thought for a moment and then answered, "I can't live with the situation the way it is. I don't know if I can get past this. But for sure, I don't want to get destroyed in a divorce, and I don't want to lose my kids." Dwight shook his head in sympathy. That seems to be the new mantra with women who are facing divorce because of their bad behavior. But rest assured, I'm going to bust my butt to limit any damage she can do to you. If you do divorce, you'll wind up with at least 50% of your joint assets. I will warn you that the courts don't give a tinker's damn about infidelity. "So, I'm going to have to pay alimony and child support?" I said, much deflated. Despite Dwight's assurance, it seemed like I was going to be taken to the cleaners. "Yes, that is a possibility. But that's why we have to strike now and strike hard," Dwight said as he studied his notes. "Right now, your wife has abandoned your marital house. And worse than that, she took your children to her lover's place and left them unattended. That's a big no-no with some of the courts. You currently have custody of your kids, and I think we can keep it that way. I'm going to try and get an emergency restraining order against your wife, which will allow you to remain in the house at least temporarily. And the longer you are there, the stronger your case gets for primary custody. If we can get that, you won't have to pay child support." "Does your wife work?" "Yes, part-time at the hospital. Chrissy works a shift on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays," I answered, and then a thought came to me, which I voiced. "That's probably where she met this bozo." Dwight agreed and then asked how much she made. I explained that she made about $25,000 a year. I, on the other hand, made about $80,000. "I have to ask a crucial question, and I want you to think hard about it," Dwight said as he looked directly at me. "Do you still love her? Do you want to try to work things out?" I put my head down and stared at the floor for a long time. When I looked up, I couldn't help it. Tears were streaming down my face. I nodded but then added, "I do love her, but I can't accept the situation as it is. She demeaned her husband and broke her vows. I am done with her. I just want a divorce." "Last question." Dwight turned the sheet of paper on his pad to expose a clean one. "As best you can, tell me what assets you guys have." I thought for a moment as I mentally ran down what assets we had. Then I explained, as a rough estimation, we had about $3,500 in our checking account. Also, we had $44,000 in a savings account and a CD worth $20,000 plus interest. I also explained that I had about $150,000 in my 401k. Chrissy had slightly less accumulated in a retirement plan from when she worked full-time at the hospital. Even though she hadn't worked as long as I had, I explained that the hospital benefits package was generally better than mine. However, surprisingly, my company offered a better healthcare plan. So we used that for the family. I thought for a moment and then mentioned that we had 2 cars which were in both our names. We, of course, had our house. However, we only bought this particular house a few years ago and had maxed out the loan. There wasn't much equity in it. Okay, here's what I want you to do. Dwight looked like a man ready to go into battle. The first thing is for you to go draw out one half of what you have in savings, checking, and the CD. Then I want you to put that money into a separate account in your name only. I can't do anything with the CD because it's in both our names, I explained. I can't cash that in without Chrissy's signature. No problem, Dwight said as he began running numbers on his calculator. Take $33,750 out of the savings account. Then pay as many bills for your house as you can from the checking account. Cancel any joint credit cards you have and use the joint checking account to pay them off. Then apply for a new credit card in your name only. I still have a credit card that I got before we were married, I said. However, I don't use it much because our joint card gives us money back. Even better, Dwight smiled. You won't have to apply for a new card. Dwight quickly scribbled onto a notepad a list of instructions and handed it to me. Right now, I want you to go out to my secretary and tell her to call Taylor Locksmith for you. You give them the address and have all the locks changed in your house. Then come back in here, and I'll fill you in on our next steps. Miss Carlson had Taylor Locksmith on the phone quickly, and I gave them the address and was told they'd be out around noon. I then went back into Dwight Tucker's office. Dwight was just getting off the phone when I sat down. We're in luck. According to the clerk, if I fax my paperwork in today, we'll be assigned Judge Johnson. Why is that lucky? I asked, confused. He hates cheaters, Dwight answered with a smile. He's an old-fashioned Bible Belt judge, and he hates spouses that cheat, be they men or be they women. Trust me, that works big in our favor. If he hadn't been available, I probably would have had to do a little more tap dancing, but I'm sure we would gotten what we want. However, Judge Johnson was a good friend of my father's. I know for sure he won't be pissed if I call him at home. Dwight stood up at that point and offered me his hand. I shook it gratefully. Before you head home, Dwight instructed me, I want you to head out and get your bank stuff done. I'm going to prepare a petition for an emergency restraining order on your wife. She won't be permitted in your house or within 500 feet of you or your children. She's currently staying with her lover, and we know she's left your kids with him. That should help greatly with the restraining order. Weeks or months down the road, the order might be kicked out, but by then you should be firmly established in the family residence as the primary caregiver. By Friday, I'll have your wife served with divorce papers. Then we're going to have to sit back and see what your wife wants to do. For the first time since Chrissy had laid her little bomb on me, I felt like I had taken back my life and part of my dignity. The bank wasn't particularly busy, so I was able to get a cashier's check quickly for my share of the money and close our one joint credit card. They told me there was a balance of $537 on it. I paid the balance off from the checking account. Then I paid the mortgage 2 months ahead. That took up another $2,600. There wasn't much left in the checking account. With a cashier's check in hand, I went down the street to another bank and opened up a checking and savings account in my name only. With that done, I headed back home. When I got there, I found the kids watching television, so I loaded them into the car. When rolled up to my in-laws, I saw Sam coming around the corner of his house from his workshop. He waved and headed back around the house. The kids piled out and headed after their grandfather. Once inside, Mary greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. A minute later, Sam came in, and after washing his hands, he came out to greet me. I'm sorry I have to tell you this. I apologized immediately. This is hard for me to say. I took a deep breath and continued. Chrissy is having an affair, and I'm filing for a divorce. I don't believe you, Sam said sharply. Chrissy isn't that type of woman. What proof do you have? She told me, I said softly as tears started to slide down my face. At that point, the back door opened, and the kids came trooping in. Please stay outside for a few minutes, I told the children. Why? Ron asked. Because I'm telling you to, I said more sharply than I meant to. At that point, Ron saw the tears on my face, and he turned immediately, pushing his siblings back out the door. She told you? Mary asked in disbelief. Yes, I said firmly, and a whole lot more. I then recounted the story of the previous evening, including the part where she was having sex, and it was good. Also, I told them about how she said to me if I divorced her, she'd ruin me. And finally, I recounted how she didn't think any other woman would want me. They were shocked, and Sam was angry. I still don't believe it. I'm going to call her and put the call on speakerphone. After dialing his daughter's number and activating the speaker, Sam put the phone on the coffee table. Hey, Daddy, Chrissy answered brightly. What can I do for you? Ron is here right now, Sam said and immediately asked the question. Are you having an affair? There was a long pause. Then Chrissy demanded, "What did he say?" "He said you were having sex with another man and that you were in love with this guy." "It's complicated, Daddy," she pleaded. "I'm trying to help this man. He suffered a terrible tragedy, and I'm trying to help him." Sam's face got bright red, and through gritted teeth, he asked, "Are you having sex with him or not?" "We've had sex, but I still love Ron. I just can't abandon this man right now. I love him also." I was totally stunned by Chrissy's father. She had always been a daddy's girl, and I just assumed that Sam would make excuses for her. "Chrissy," Sam's voice was a bit strangled at this point. "I never thought my daughter would ever become an immoral woman." "Daddy, please," was all that was heard as Sam pushed the disconnect button. A moment or two later, the phone began to ring again, and Mary went to answer it. "Leave it alone," Sam commanded. But Mary snatched it up and tried to answer anyway. Sam grabbed the phone out of her hand and threw it against the fireplace. "I said leave it alone," he screamed at his wife. She was totally shocked by her husband's anger and backed up. I was even more shocked. Dead silence filled the room as Sam and Mary were trying to process what they had just learned. Finally, Sam came over to me and hugged me. "Ron, I am so sorry. I don't even know what to say. I can't believe our daughter has done this to you. Anything that we can do to help you, we will. And I mean anything at all. We will be there for you and the kids. I'll have Mary talk to our daughter later and let you know how that comes out. Right now, I'm too angry to talk to her." After that, I had to leave so I could get back to the house for the locksmith. After herding the kids into my car, I hugged Sam and Mary and invited them for dinner where we could talk more about my problem. On the way home, Sally burst into tears. "Are you and Mom getting a divorce? Where did you hear that?" I demanded. "From me," Ron said defiantly. I snuck back into the house and listened. I figured it was something bad. I just didn't figure it was that. I sighed and realized they had a right to know what was going on. But then the question was how to tell my kids about their mother without causing too much damage. Damn Chrissy, her selfishness was hurting the kids. I bet she never thought about that when she was climbing into bed with her new man. "Unfortunately, it seems that your mother and I will be getting a divorce," I said softly. "But why?" Kyle asked as he started to cry. "Your mother has fallen in love with another man," I said simply. "You mean she's having sex with another man?" Sally said between her tears. "I hate her. She's a total witch." "Sally, don't say that about your mother," I admonished my daughter, but my words were hollow as those were my exact feelings right now. The locks were changed and none too soon. 10 minutes after the locksmith van left, Chrissy came roaring into the driveway. "You had to tell my parents, didn't you?" "I'm sure that you told them that I'm a 304 and a hooker," Chrissy screamed. "I thought you loved me?" "Chrissy," I said sadly, "I do love you with all my heart, but I will never accept that you are going to be screwing some other guy. And you have no idea how much you hurt me when you told me that I was just an ugly middle-aged guy that no other woman would ever want to be with. In essence, you told me you're doing me a favor by staying with me. Your pity love, I can do without. Not only did you do that, but you threatened to ruin me. Yet, you dare to tell me you love me. You really need to take a good hard look at yourself, Chrissy. People who love each other don't do things like that. As for telling your parents," I continued, "if you're so convinced that what you're doing is right, then it shouldn't matter that your parents know." Chrissy looked stricken after I laid my accusations on her. "Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say those things," she tried to apologize. "I was just angry at the moment because you called me a 304 and a hooker. Truly, Ron, to call your wife and the mother of your children those names. You promised to love, honor, and cherish me. Shame on you. If you truly loved me, you would accept the situation. I'm not leaving you for him. I just love him also, and I'm trying to help him. He's much younger than me and will eventually move on." "Chrissy," I said, shaking my head slowly, "if you're going to quote our wedding vows, you should include the part where you promise to forsake all others. And to remind you that a married woman does not go out opening her legs for young men just because they're bobo hurt. Besides, I have accepted the situation that you are damaged goods, and I am not going to have you in my life anymore. Like you said, accept it or don't. That's your choice." Chrissy turned red and seemed uncertain at that moment. Then her eyes narrowed, and the arrogance was back. She was breathing hard, and I figured she was trying to figure out her next argument on why I should accept the situation. At that moment, I wished to God that I had no love for her at all, but I still loved her deeply. "Look, Ron," Chrissy said with a tone that she used with the children when she wanted them to behave, "stop being an idiot. I'm your wife. You know me. I love you, and I will come back to you when this man is well again." I was so sad, but I had enough. My love for her died and was now replaced by pure hatred. No, Chrissy, I don't know you. My wife and the mother of my children was a warm and loving person who would never cheat on me. You are a person I don't know. For all I know, this is just one of many affairs that you've had over the years. I can't be sure of anything about you anymore. Who knows, if you are regularly opening your legs for every Tom, Dick, and Harry who is hurt. Chrissy's eyes narrowed, and her face flushed. I could tell that she was furious at this moment and about to explode. This is not an affair, and this is the first person that I've ever had sex with since we were married. This man has been badly hurt, and I am going to help him whether you agree or not. Suit yourself. I don't want this and will never accept this. Not only that, but because I no longer trust anything about you, I intend to have a DNA test done on the kids to make sure that they really are mine. You are a total a-hole, Chrissy spit out at me. I can see that you intend to make this into something very ugly. Just remember what I told you will happen if you try to divorce me. I would rather die in poverty alone than ever be with a woman who has no morals, I said. Looking down from the porch at my wife, I shook my head. I could take very little solace from the fact that she had no idea of the shitstorm that was probably going to descend on her. I think that she had convinced herself that she could have her cake and eat it too, and there would be no consequences. It was at this time that the sheriff's vehicle pulled up. The deputy got out of his car and approached Chrissy. "Are you Chrissy Jameson?" the deputy asked. "Yes, I am," Chrissy responded with confusion. "Ma'am, this is a restraining order." The deputy handed her the court order. "It says that you cannot go into that house, and you have to stay 500 feet away. Do you understand?" "But that's my home," Chrissy sputtered. "All my things are inside." "Ma'am, I'll allow you 15 minutes in the house to gather your stuff." The deputy looked up at me, and I nodded. "Mr. Jameson will stay out here." "Officer, I'd rather take my children out in the backyard if that's all right," I asked. "But I want to see my children." Chrissy was frantic by now. "Ma'am," the deputy was getting nervous that this situation was about to get out of hand on him. "The reason for the restraining order is to protect, specifically, your children from you." Chrissy wheeled around with anger in her eyes. "You did this. You're trying to take my children away from me." "No, Chrissy, you did this," I said calmly. "I simply informed the court that you had abandoned our house and left our children, unattended, at your lover's house where you were having sex with him. I didn't abandon our house, and he's a wonderful man." Chrissy screamed. "He's just someone I'm trying to help. By sleeping with him, if he is so wonderful, why don't you go and live with him? Give him your love for rest of your life. Or does he only want to use your glory hole for cheap pleasure?" I responded more for the deputy's benefit than my wife's. I took the kids to the backyard and told them that their mother was gathering her stuff to take to her new man's house, but I would let them see her before she left. I did not get any pleasure out of the meeting between Chrissy and the children. Kyle was crying so hard when I took them back out front. He rushed into his mother's arms and wept bitterly, begging her not to leave. "Please, Ron," Chrissy sobbed. "Can't you see what you're doing to the children?" Anger flared in me, but I forced it down, and with ice in my voice, I told her, "Don't talk about the kids. I haven't done anything to the children. You were the one who took the kids out to your lover's house and made them stay there while you drilled your sex toy. Ron, why can't you understand that I can't abandon him?" Chrissy said through a torrent of tears. "Chrissy, I'm sure you thought long and hard before we had that shitty conversation yesterday. I understand that you cannot abandon him, so stay with him. You have already abandoned your husband, your kids, and your home. It's time we did the same to you. I guess, in all of your thought processes, you never considered the consequences of your decision. Now you're beginning to see those consequences. I hope you're happy." Ron just stood there looking at his mother and then asked why. Chrissy fumbled around, trying to explain what she was doing to her son. Ron listened, but it was clear that he didn't believe any of it. Yet, it was Sally who really let her mother have it. "You're nothing but a selfish witch," she said as she spit on her mother's face. I had to grab my daughter because I thought she might hit Chrissy. I also demanded that she apologize. Sally flatly refused. Chrissy was totally blindsided and dropped to the ground sobbing. I wasn't totally shocked by my daughter's behavior. Sally and Chrissy had been going through a rough patch lately and seemed to be butting heads more and more. To me, it just seemed like the average teenage rebellious stage that I thought Sally would outgrow. But now, I could only hope that Chrissy hadn't permanently damaged her relationship with her daughter. As I held Sally, Chrissy got up and ran to her car. As she drove away, I could see her banging the steering wheel furiously. Kyle tried to run after the car screaming, "Mommy, please don't leave us." Ron finally caught him and brought him back. The deputy looked at me sadly. "Mr. Jameson, I am really sorry for what you're going through." That night, Sam and Mary came over for dinner. I was going to grill up some hamburgers and make some salad, but Mary chased me out of the kitchen and made meatloaf and her world-famous macaroni and cheese. The kids loved that. While Mary was cooking, Sam and I sat in the living room with a couple of beers. I can see that he was really distraught over what his daughter was doing. I explained to him about the restraining order and that I had gotten it because Chrissy had left the children unattended at her lover's place. That saddened Sam even more. "Mary spoke to Chrissy about an hour after you left," Sam said finally. "How did that go?" I asked, hopefully. "Terrible," Sam admitted. "Mary tried to reason with Chrissy to no avail. Chrissy is convinced she is right, and we are all wrong. She thinks we're horrible people, and that's when Mary got angry, really angry. I've never seen her that angry before." The conversation ended when Mary told her daughter not to call us anymore. Mary also told Chrissy that if it ever went to court, she was going to testify against her. As you can expect, the meal was very subdued. The only bright spot was when Sam invited the kids over to work on their go-karts the next day. That, at least, brought smiles to Ron and Kyle's faces. Sally just sat there with a pissed look on her face. She didn't eat anything, but I decided to let that go. I think she was hurting almost as much as I was. On the following Friday, Chrissy was served with divorce papers at the hospital. I learned from friends who worked there that Chrissy totally lost it. Apparently, she was really angry with me. She swore at the process server and vowed she was going to ruin me. Finally, they sent her home, or more accurately, to her lover's house. Chrissy then hired a lawyer of her own. Her attorney was a woman that Dwight knew well as he had faced off against her several times. Her name was Amber Wright, and Dwight said she was not nearly as good as she thought she was. Amber immediately tried to have the restraining order rescinded. Judge Johnson was not sympathetic. He said that the children were totally safe at the moment, and he would only modify the order. He told Chrissy that she could come to the house for supervised visits, but her boyfriend was not allowed to be within 500 feet of the house at any time. He warned her that if she violated that prohibition, he'd rescind the visitation rights. Chrissy was ecstatic by the modification. For myself, I wasn't upset because I wanted the kids to see their mother. However, Chrissy's joy was short-lived. The judge then ordered Chrissy to start paying child support, and the amount he stipulated meant that she was going to have to go back to work full-time. Even with her blow-up at the hospital, I knew they would take her on full-time. There was always a shortage of nurses. Besides, she was an excellent nurse. Sometime after the hearing, the DNA results arrived in the mail. It took me almost half a day to get up the courage to open the envelope. When I finally did open it and read the report, my heart was filled with pure happiness for the first time since this mess had started. My kids were truly mine. I reread the report several times to reassure myself that it indeed confirmed that I was the biological father to my kids. Then I wondered what I would have done if the report had said that one or all of my kids weren't mine. In an instant of clarity, I realized that I would love them the same no matter what. I even thought that for the sake of my kids, would I be willing to forgive all if Chrissy would just leave that man and come home? The answer was no. She would never be able to put proper values in my kids. She was a bad influence, and I needed to keep her away from them. I used up all of my personal days and my vacation time, so I could stay home with the kids. When that ran out, thankfully, Chrissy's parents were willing to watch them. Sam and Mary were still refusing to talk to their daughter until she came to her senses. Sam said she called 3 or 4 times a day for about a week. Then Sam blocked her number. The visitation schedule was left up to Chrissy and me to work out. Actually, that meant that our attorneys would communicate what we wanted. Finally, it was agreed that Chrissy could visit Monday, Wednesday, and Friday between 6 and 7 o'clock in the evening. Mary volunteered to supervise. However, I insisted that I be there for the first visit. I wanted Chrissy and Mary also to know precisely what the rules would be. On the first Monday, a car parked in the street, and Chrissy got out. I didn't recognize the car but quickly realized that it must be her lover's car. Chrissy walked up the house nervously and smiled tentatively at us both. "Hello, Ron. How are you?" "Mother, it's good to see you." "Chrissy, you have to leave," I snapped at her. "The judge told you that your lover wasn't allowed within 500 feet of this house." Horror spread over her face. But he was just dropping me off." "Chrissy, are you brain dead or what?" I was furious. The judge was quite clear. "No lover here. Tell that a-hole to leave now, and I won't tell the judge." Chrissy nodded her head quickly and started back toward the car. Then a thought struck me. I walked out at an angle and pulled a pin from my pocket. As Chrissy was talking to her lover, I copied the license plate number down. Then I returned to the porch as the car drove off. Okay, he said that he'll come back and pick me up. Chrissy was now defiant. Well, tell him to meet you down the street because I don't want him anywhere near the house. Chrissy's face filled with anger. Ron, I'm really getting tired of how you're treating me. You didn't have to steal the money from our checking account or cancel my credit card. Chrissy, I didn't steal anything. The money that was taken from the checking account was used to pay off the credit card and then 2 mortgage payments. I wanted to be sure the kids had a place to stay while we sorted our situation out. As to canceling the credit card, I didn't want to be stuck with any expenses you might charge while you're running around with your lover. Chrissy's face flushed red with, I assumed, anger and arrogance. This is not an affair, and he isn't my lover. Ron, you're being an a-hole. Before I could say anything, Mary stepped forward and slapped Chrissy across the face. I was as stunned as Chrissy. Chrissy stepped back and stared at her mother, bewildered. Chrissy, if you ever disrespect Ron again, I will tear that dress off you and beat your bum red. Now, if you want to see the kids, they're in the living room. I want a word with Ron, and then I'll be in. But be forewarned, if you do or say anything wrong, I will bodily throw you out of this house. Chrissy nodded meekly and went inside. Ron, I apologize for my brain-dead daughter, Mary said sympathetically. Thanks for sticking up for me, I said with real gratitude, and then I left. 2 weeks after that first hearing, as Dwight had mentioned, the restraining order was lifted. But by that time, I had established that I was the primary caregiver, and I was allowed to stay in the house since Chrissy was still seeing her lover. Chrissy's child support remained, but she now could have unsupervised visits with the children in public. However, the judge admonished her that she couldn't take them to her lover's house, and he couldn't be with her when she had the kids. After 4 months of delay, our first real day in court to finalize the divorce came up. Before either of our attorneys could say a word, Judge Johnson asked if Chrissy or I had been to any counseling. The 2 attorneys admitted that there had been none. So, the judge requested 8 sessions of marital counseling. Neither Chrissy nor I opposed the sessions. For me, I thought they were a waste of time, but I didn't want to piss off the judge. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel that Chrissy still believed that she could convince me or maybe the therapist that what she was doing was right. The first meeting with the therapist in Patterson proved to be precisely what I thought it would be. Chrissy spent most of the hour trying to explain that what she was doing was the Christian thing to do. I thought the therapist was going to swallow her eye teeth the first time Chrissy launched into her explanation. I believe it was Chrissy's arrogance that truly shocked and the second week, and began gently probing Chrissy's arguments. She asked if she thought it would be fair if I went out and started having sex with a woman. I cringed, waiting for the attack on my manhood. But this time, it wasn't going to fly. Chrissy didn't answer right away, but I didn't care what she said. During the months that the divorce had dragged on, I had made some changes. I know it sounds vain, but when you've been told by the woman you love that you aren't good enough, you desperately want to prove her wrong. So, I took the plunge and had hair transplant surgery. I didn't require a lot of it, but it still cost about $4,000. I was really back and forth about whether to have the hair procedure. I didn't know if I wanted to put up with the teasing. However, I was still using my vacation time, so I went for it. As near as I understood the procedure, my hair was buzz cut. Then plugs were pulled out of the back of my head and planted in the front. I pretty much stayed in the house for the first week. My kids didn't know what to make of me and asked a bunch of questions. I just told them that it was a minor medical procedure. After about 10 days, I looked pretty much like my old self, and each week after that, the hair got longer and longer. After the procedure was mostly healed, I started an exercise routine. I also started to run. At first, I could only go about a half mile before I felt like my lungs would explode, and my legs would collapse out from under me. Eventually, I got up to where I could run 10 miles. I also joined a gym. I changed the lunch and supper menu in our house so that we were all eating healthier. The kids groused at first because I cut out the fast foods, cookies, ice cream, pizza, and many other junk foods. However, I did some searching on the internet and found some fun foods to cook. They loved it when I surprised them with something new that also tasted great. Some of the concoctions didn't turn out so great, but we laughed about those, scrapped them into the garbage, and made sandwiches. As it turned out, my kids loved helping me in the kitchen. It became a real family thing. Aside from the pain that still burned in my heart because of Chrissy's betrayal, I was beginning to feel better and better about myself. In fact, the first day back at work, I got a real ego boost. I checked in at the office to see what they had scheduled for me, and the receptionist, Trudy, welcomed me back with a strange look. I thought she was going to give me grief about my new hair, but she didn't. "Welcome back, Ron," she chirped, and then her eyes started studying me. "There's something different about you." I blushed a little. "Oh, I've been on a diet. I've lost 18 pounds. I want to lose maybe another 5. She laughed and nodded. "Well, it really suits you. If I wasn't married, I'd be all over you." Thanks for the ego boost, but according to my wife, I'm just a middle-aged man with no sex appeal. So much so, she's found herself a lover. I tried to make a joke out of it, but it came out flat. By now, everyone in the company knew about my plight. Storm clouds crossed over Trudy's eyes. "Chrissy is an idiot. Either that or she has a screw loose. You're a great guy, Ron, and there are plenty of women out there who would be thrilled to have you. Don't let Chrissy get in your head." That was the best shot in the arm I had gotten in months. Suddenly, I didn't feel like such a loser. I snapped back to the present when and asked my wife again, "Chrissy, how would you feel if Ron had come home and told you that he was sleeping with another woman?" As I mentioned, I was waiting for Chrissy to attack my manhood, but she didn't. I did see her eyeing me during our first meeting. I guess she could no longer say that I had thinning hair and was overweight. That was another boost to my ego. Anyway, I just sat in my chair and waited as Chrissy seemed to be thinking about what to say. She couldn't very well say that I couldn't have another woman if she had another man. "I guess if he was trying to help that woman get over some tragedy," she said with arrogance, "I would be okay with it. What if he told you that he loved this woman and that the sex was very good?" Again, I would accept it, Chrissy insisted. However, he would have to assure me that the children and I would be taken care of. The session continued on like that within trying to get Chrissy to see that her position was really ridiculous, but Chrissy refused to budge. As I feared, these sessions were just a waste of time. Chrissy was just going to use them to try to convince me that she was right. That was never going to happen. And as it was, the initial shock of what Chrissy was doing had begun to wear off. It's a funny thing about love. If it isn't nurtured, it begins to die. By the 3rd week, something had changed. Chrissy came into the session much subdued and said little. Mostly she just listened. Whatever had changed, it had set Chrissy back a bit. Maybe she wasn't as arrogant now because and was calmly and compassionately challenging her entire premise at every point. I also saw Chrissy checking me out when she didn't think I'd notice. I continued to work out and lost a few more pounds. I'd even begun doing a lot of work in the yard, which had given me a great tan. A couple of months before the therapy sessions had been ordered, I made another change. I was becoming dissatisfied with my job. Oh, I loved fixing cars, and not just the engines. I got tremendous satisfaction doing bodywork. I had been fixing old cars up since I was 14 years old. I could do it all. Now, I saw owning my own business as a means to being able to spend more time with my kids. I talked it over with Sam, and he agreed to help me. I wanted to set up my own shop and start building a business. But I couldn't just quit my job and do it. I didn't have the money to carry me until the business would sustain us. We'd starve before I could make a go of it. However, since Sam's farm was also in an industrial zone, he agreed to let me start my business in his workshop. Actually, Sam's tinkering shop had once been a barn for horses that he had converted. There was plenty of space for Sam and me. If I got the business established, Sam agreed to lease me a piece of land on the road to build my own building. I spent time at work studying how they had things set up. The dealership was basically set up to handle a higher volume than I was anticipating. They did a little bodywork at the dealership location, but much of it was subbed out. With this in mind, I scaled down what I needed in the matter of tools and equipment. One thing for sure, I need to build a paint booth. Sam was not only okay with that, but actually helped me construct it. I spent the savings I had liberated from our joint savings plus a small loan from Sam to finance the venture. I started part-time, mostly on the weekends and evenings. It was fun, and the kids would come out many times to watch or even help. I really enjoyed teaching Ron how to do things. Even Sally got her hands dirty and loved to tell her girlfriends how she helped change out an engine or helped paint a Corvette. That also made her more interesting to the boys at school. I got business by word of mouth, and soon, I was wondering if I shouldn't strike out full-time. That decision actually came to a head when I was told that they needed me to work over the weekend to get some backed-up workout. I couldn't do it because I had customers of my own that I needed to take care of. I figured I was going to get fired when I went in to tell Bob that I couldn't work because I had my own business obligations. "Got a minute, Bob?" I asked as I stuck my head into his office. "Sure. Ron, he waved me in. I'm glad you're working this weekend. We've got 44 cars coming in this Friday that have been sold and need to be gone over from top to bottom. We have to get them out by the end of the month. I winced a little when he told me that. Most people don't realize that the factories have special incentives for dealerships. If they sell a certain number of cars in a month, they get a discount off the invoice. For instance, the factory could say if you sell 300 vehicles this month, we'll take $150 off your cost. That's a $45,000 saving. That money in the owner's pocket. But if the dealership only sells 299, they get nothing. This was a big deal to the dealership. That's just it, Bob, I said, and could immediately feel the sweat dripping down my back. I can't work this weekend. I sort of have started my own business on weekends, and I've got stuff I need to get done. I'm sorry, Ron, Bob said curtly, but if you can't work this weekend, I may have to let you go. I understand, Bob, I said with resignation. I just hope there are no hard feelings. I have been trying to build up a business of my own. I want to spend more time with my kids and make a little extra money for their college funds. I'll clean out my locker. I hate to lose you, Ron, Bob said sadly. Tell me about your business. Where are you located, and what kind of jobs are you doing? I explained that I had set up my operation on my father-in-law's property and told him what equipment and tools I had. Actually, I was set up to do just about any kind of car repairs, including body work. Go get yourself a cup of coffee and then come back here, Bob said as he reached for his phone. I didn't want any coffee, so I went to my locker and put all my stuff in a box. Losing this job meant that it was going to be slim pickings for a bit. The kids would have to be put on Chrissy's health insurance plan as I had taken her off of mine. Still, I was confident that I could make it. I was turning away almost as much business as I was taking in. Bob motioned me into his office when he saw me coming down the hall. I've got a deal for you, Ron, he said excitedly. If you will work this weekend, we'll reimburse you for any money you lose because your customers are unhappy. No, I shook my head. I couldn't do that to my customers, Bob. Hold your horses, I'm not done, Bob said as he slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was an independent contractor's agreement. I really need you this weekend. I also think you can convince your customers to wait a few days. If you can do that, and your shop passes our inspection, we'll hire you as an independent contractor to do some of our body work. I was stunned, but I took the deal. After that weekend, I was basically working full-time at my business. Occasionally, I would go into the dealership if they had a problem, and I wasn't busy. Also, Sam started helping me part-time, and Mary agreed to do my books. I was now making more money than I ever had working for the dealership. The only thing that was still screwed up in my life was my marriage. And after the 4th counseling session, I wanted to put an end to them. I was pretty much beyond caring what Chrissy was doing with her new love. Oh, don't get me wrong, it still stung when I would stop and think about the fact that my wife was with another man. But I wasn't stopping to think about it as often. It was in our 5th session that I decided I was going on the offensive. I figured if I attacked Chrissy hard enough, she might choose to put an end to these wasteful sessions. I decided to confront her on the most hurtful thing that she had said to me, that I was basically too ugly to attract another woman. When asked if I had anything to say, I lit into Chrissy. Chrissy, I've decided that you are not only a totally selfish person, but you're basically a very nasty person, I said with venom. How dare you tell the man you supposedly love that he is an ugly middle-aged man who no woman would ever want? You hurt me in a way that I don't think I'll ever get over. Oh God, Ron, I'm so sorry, she sobbed. I'm so ashamed that I ever said that. If I could take it back, I would. I do love you. Just not enough to give up your lover and keep your sorries to yourself. You will need it more than I do. I snapped back. Chrissy burst into uncontrollable sobbing. No matter what and/or I said, we couldn't calm Chrissy down. Eventually, and called an end to the session but gave us homework to do before our next one. I wasn't looking forward to it because by now, I figured these sessions were absolutely a total waste of time. The homework was simply to answer a series of questions. Some of them I understood, like how is our relationship with our parents? How is our sex life? Some of the questions didn't make any sense to me, like what my favorite food and drink were. What kind of vehicle did I drive? But the one question really caused me to sit back and think. It was if I could change one thing, what would it be? I had been working on this questionnaire the night after that last session, but I put it away after I read that question. I wanted to think about that one for a bit. The next day, I finally wrote that I wished I had been a better husband, so my wife wouldn't have stopped loving me. We turned the papers in at our next session, but didn't even look at them. Instead, She started by asking if we had any questions or if there was something that we'd like to discuss. "I'd like to ask Chrissy a question," I said immediately, and nodded at me, and I turned to face my estranged wife. "Chrissy, I don't see that we're getting anywhere with these sessions. You've made it consistently clear that you're not going to leave your friend Bruce Hartman, and that leaves no chance for reconciliation. Why don't we just stop this and get the divorce done?" "How do you know his name?" Chrissy asked in shock. "That first time you came over to visit the kids, I got his license number. After that, it wasn't hard to find out his name. But it doesn't really matter. I have no interest in getting back at him or even talking to him. I just don't care anymore. I want to move on." Chrissy looked up at me with the saddest eyes I think I've ever seen. I hated seeing her in pain, and I wanted to go over and hug her. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything, so I continued. "I know your lawyer hasn't been happy with the settlement I've offered so far. Well, I've told my attorney to offer some alternatives. I'm willing to give you more visitation to the kids. I'm also offering to pay you $1,000 a month in alimony for 3 years. I just want you out at any cost." I watched Chrissy for a reaction, but all I saw was just a terrible sadness. She had made it perfectly clear to me that she wasn't going to stop seeing the guy, and I couldn't and wouldn't accept my wife having sex with another man. For the life of me, I just didn't understand how she could possibly think that I would live with a situation like that. At this point, it didn't matter. I just wanted out. I decided to push to end this farce. "I know that what you said about me was partially true. It did hurt like hell when you said it, and I did tell you that I didn't think I'd ever get over that. But as time goes on, I realize that I am getting over it. Anyway, as you can see, I've tried to fix myself up. I don't think that I'm the man you thought so little of when you took up with Bruce. I've also started dating. After we're divorced, you can take care of your gentleman friend for as long as you want. But I think it's time to end this, if for no other reason, so you can start to rebuild a relationship with your kids." With that, Chrissy burst into tears and fled the room, and looked as stunned as I was. Finally, and composed herself and told me that she wanted to see Chrissy by herself for the next session, and then me alone for the last session. With a sigh, I agreed. When Chrissy unloaded all this shit on me, I was furious and filled with hate. But now, months after the fact, I was just worn out. I could see the pain this whole thing was inflicting on not only me, but Chrissy, her parents, and most of all our children. I wanted that to stop. I also was no longer furious that Chrissy was having sex with some guy. When I arrived for my final meeting with N, I was not only happy that Chrissy wasn't there, but also glad that this would be the end of the counseling. "Ron, I want to commend you for your restraint through all these sessions," and began. "I know this entire situation has been unbelievably painful for you. After meeting with Chrissy last week, I think I finally understand what happened to your wife." I was now sitting on the edge of my chair. Finally, maybe I learned why Chrissy decided to destroy our marriage. "Do you remember the homework I gave you?" she asked. I just nodded. I had forgotten about it and figured that it had been of little value in these counseling sessions. The way you both answered one particular question surprised me, and said as she pulled 2 pieces of paper from her folder. "The question was if you could change one thing, what would it be? Do you remember that?" I nodded. "You answered that you wished you could have been a better husband so that your wife wouldn't have stopped loving you." When Chrissy heard that, she broke down and cried harder than ever. It took me quite a while to calm her down. I didn't know what to think or say or do, so I just sat there. "Ron, your wife, never stopped loving you. Yeah, that's why she continues sleeping with Bruce, because she loved me so much." And gave me a disapproving look, but then sighed. "Ron, what I discovered about Chrissy was that she was going through a severe midlife crisis. As the children were getting older, Chrissy felt her life slipping away from her. She is, and I suspect, she has always been a warm and caring person. Somewhere along the line, she found Bruce, who needed her terribly. She confused her desire to be young again and Bruce's terrible need for forgiveness over his wife's death for love. That doesn't change anything, and," I protested, "she's still sleeping with Bruce." "Actually, no, she's not, Ron." "Really? This was news to me. Then why didn't Chrissy tell me?" And sighed. "I know this isn't going to change your feeling at this point, but you need to know the whole truth. Bruce left town the same day that you told Chrissy that you were going to start dating, and you just wanted to get on with the divorce. She figured that she had already lost you. I thought about that, and was right. It didn't change my mind. There had been too much said and done to go back. I had my life on track now, and I wanted to move forward. I would never be able to trust Chrissy again, and I didn't want to live like that. But aside from anything else, I wanted it so the kids could, hopefully, start bonding with their mother again. Sally's grades had slipped badly since this whole mess had started, and I was sure that she was still angry at her mother. Kyle had become sullen and withdrawn and was acting out in school. This was perhaps the worst consequence of Chrissy's actions. Kyle was no longer that happy-go-lucky kid. Ron was handling it the best of all. He wasn't angry or sullen, but anytime his mother's name came up in a conversation, he changed the subject. Maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps his reaction is worse than the two girls. I just don't know. One last thing, Ron, and said as she pulled out the second piece of paper. This is Chrissy's answer to the question about changing one thing. She wrote that if she could change one thing, it would be that she never met Bruce Hartman. The divorce went through, and as per the agreement, Chrissy used to visit the kids on Wednesdays and Fridays. I made sure I'd take the kids out on Friday for dinner before Chrissy arrived. At first, our interaction was very formal and awkward, but then we started sharing a meal or two together with the kids. And then one evening, Chrissy asked me if she could stay the night. No, I answered with a chuckle. The bed in the spare room isn't all that comfortable. It's better if you just go back to your place. And next time, never think that I would be in the same room alone with you. As for Bruce Hartman, his story checks out to be not completely true. His wife died when she was driving away from him. She found him cheating on her, and she left in rage. She was overspeeding and died in a car crash. Why did he leave town? I guess it was due to a severe beating that he took outside a local bar. 5 broken ribs, 1 busted kneecap, 5 missing teeth, and 2 busted nuts. I had to call in a favor with some friends. It was worth it. The beating will ensure that he is never going to be with any other woman, let alone please any. As for Chrissy, little by little, she was able to restore a loving relationship with her children. Or I should say that she restored a loving relationship with Sally and Kyle. No matter what Chrissy did, there always seemed to be a distance between her and Ron. I would have thought that Sally would be the one to hold a grudge, but she was the first to fully embrace the return of her mother. Chrissy finally mended her fences with her parents. However, like Ron, there was a slight coolness with her father. Anyway, most Sundays we would have dinner there like a family, but we weren't. Chrissy kept telling me how sorry she was for everything that had happened. I finally told her to please stop. I will never forgive her, and it's useless to try. Just to add on, I told her, "Oh, please, Chrissy, stop being so childish. I told you how things are going to be. I have no intention of arguing with you about it. The discussion is over. Accept it or don't. That's your choice. We are never getting back together again. Even if you were the last woman on the planet and the fate of mankind depended on me making love to you, I'll pass." 3 years later, I got married. I married Sally's teacher, and it was amazing. How we met and how it all went down is a story for a different time, but what matters is that the kids over her and have accepted her as part of the family. Chrissy has still not accepted the fact that I have moved on. Well, I am not going to do anything about her. After all the discussion was over, she either accepts it or she does not. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.